So, there's a new rumor flying around that the next Call of Duty game will be on the Nintendo Switch. Full disclosure, before I get into this comes from this, quote, industry insider who has mentioned he has knowledge about the upcoming release, also mentioning that the game will be titled Black Ops 4. So, obviously take it with a grain of salt. That's where all these rumors are coming from, but, a lot of people are covering this, and I don't really want to discuss, how likely or unlikely this is to actually happen. There have been plenty of Call of Duty games in the past that have come to Nintendo systems, even in the post-Modern Warfare era. I divide the history of the Call of Duty series between the pre- and the post-Modern Warfare time periods. But there were Call of Duty games on the Wii, and we had Call of Duty Ghost Dog on the Wii U, as well as one of the Black Ops games, I think it was Black Ops 2. And given the role the Switch has been on, it would probably make some sense to get the game onto the Switch. But my question is, who really cares? And I don't mean that in a dickish way. Okay, maybe half dickish. I'm being half a dick, okay? I don't like these games at all. I'll be upfront about it, but I realize there are many who do. So perhaps there is an audience for Call of Duty on the Switch. And I'm sort of just asking you because, for one, these games, specifically the ones on the Wii U, they didn't do so hot. Now, I'm not saying that's necessarily because people playing on the Wii U didn't want to support them. There's always this chicken versus the egg conundrum with many AAA third-party games and Nintendo platforms with Nintendo players, where it's like developers feel like the Nintendo fans aren't going to support their game, so they cheap out on the Nintendo version, and then, Nintendo players don't buy it because it's a lesser version, and it's kind of like, around and around we go, right? And again, I've never played any of these games on those Nintendo platforms, so I have nothing to really add in terms of how these games stacked up against the competition. Were there missing features? Did they not run well? I would just assume the Wii versions had to be awful. Did they even have voice chat functions? I know in these intense, hyper-realistic, grown-up shooters, being able to communicate with your team is essential to success on the battlefield.
I'm not playing. You keep killing me. No, I can't even get out the door. Get out my face. I can't see.
Yeah, boys, if this comes true, won't it be nice to get Call of Duty on the Switch and you can put down your baby Mario and Zelda games? Splatoon? Oh, you shoot ink because you're too little to play a game with real guns? Yeah, you can throw those games right in the trash where they belong and do war with the real men. Also, with games like Call of Duty, there's the issue of whether or not people were playing them post-launch. Like I get the big draw to these games are the online. They have a story mode, but most people buy and put a ton of hours into these games because of the online. So, obviously, if there weren't people to play with, that would suck. And with the Switch, you're already going into this with a deficit because of that lower install base. So I could see these sorts of problems being repeat issues on the Switch. I personally feel like, for one, people who are into Call of Duty are already playing it with their friends on their preferred platform. And I'm sorry, but I don't buy the idea that many people would be discovering this series for the first time. I feel like if you play video games, you know what Call of Duty is. And again, this isn't one of these franchises that Nintendo players haven't been able to experience before. There's been plenty of Call of Duty on Nintendo in the past. Now, I'm not saying at all it wouldn't be successful, but part of why I'd worry about this game releasing on the Switch and flopping is that it would send the message to not bring over perhaps other major online FPS games because you fear they may suffer the same fate. And while I've never seen people in my comment sections or other forums that I visit clamoring for Call of Duty on the Switch, I've seen a ton of people begging for Overwatch to make its way onto the Switch platform. And while yes, a game like Overwatch would have many of the same hurdles as Call of Duty being an online FPS, I think it's a better fit for the Switch in a multitude of ways, beyond things like simply the art style, gameplay, and all that jazz. You know, Blizzard has made it clear that Overwatch is a game they are committed to supporting in the long run. Let's not forget, even if you do manage to get people on board for the first Call of Duty on the Switch, you have to hope they come back for the second game next year, and the third after that, etc. And on the other hand, you got Overwatch. It's becoming its own beast that will likely be around for several years, I would guess, at least. So a game like that could launch on the Switch and gradually grow the player base over time. And especially with the Switch being, you know, a new platform, you don't necessarily need to get everyone in on day one. Again, just like Overwatch has been doing, you know, as long as it continues to be supported, you can get more people on next year and the year after that. Or Call of Duty, it's like every year you kind of get everybody in there buying that game. And I'm not saying that if Call of Duty released on the Switch and sold poorly, that we simply wouldn't get Overwatch on the Switch as well, but you can't argue that it wouldn't play any factor in that decision. Like, if this was a repeat, and Call of Duty, the biggest shooter franchise around, released their newest game on the Switch day one, with all the features, DLC, whatever, and only got a 1% sales boost for releasing their game on the Switch, I don't think that's necessarily something that devs and publishers would be intrigued by. Essentially, I think it would suck if a game selling poorly that was never going to do well turned off a developer from releasing a game that would do well. And with Activision Blizzard being a combined entity, I definitely think that Overwatch team is watching what goes on with Call of Duty. Still, I don't really know. This is based off my assumptions just from what I've seen in the past, as well as just not seeing many people saying they want Call of Duty on the Switch in the first place. Granted, that's anecdotal, but again, a game like Overwatch, I see people talking about that one all the time. So I don't know if this game would sell well on the Switch. You can say it's a good thing whenever we get a big-time AAA game on the Switch, but if those games don't perform, if people don't buy them, it can actually end up doing damage in the long run. But on the positive side, and I almost forgot to mention this, you know, we've been talking about the Nintendo Switch's upcoming paid online service, and I've mentioned we need some serious heavy hitters if Nintendo thinks people are gonna, you know, pony up for that service. I mean, you can't really get much bigger than Call of Duty, but just because Call of Duty is a big IP doesn't necessarily mean it's going to do huge numbers on the Switch. And with that, this video is a wrap. Let me know if you care whether or not Call of Duty games begin to come to the Switch in the comments. Would you actually buy them? Do you think a lot of other people would want to play Call of Duty on the Switch? As always, I'm John Zakari, and thanks for watching.